morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jaron Day. I lead cybersecurity research here at KLAS, and we're so glad that you're joining us today for this important discussion. So whether you work directly in cybersecurity or support it as a healthcare leader, you really do play a critical role in protecting the patients and the systems that we all serve. So cybersecurity can really feel complex and overwhelming, but it's an area where strong leadership with clear priorities can really make a big difference. So today we wanted to explore some research that sheds light on how organizations are really approaching cybersecurity across the country and kind of what's working. So we'll be looking at what the biggest gaps are and how you can help navigate this challenge together. And this study is the 2025 Healthcare Cybersecurity Benchmarking Study, and it's co-sponsored by KLAS Research, Censinet, the American Hospital Association, the Health Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and the Healthcare and Public Health Sector Coordinating Council and Scottsdale Institute. That's kind of a mouthful, but the study is really the industry's first and only collaborative initiative to establish a robust, objective, and actionable peer benchmarking to strengthen cybersecurity maturity across the healthcare sectors. So our goal today isn't really to promote any specific solution, but really just to share real patterns and around emerging risk and best practices that you can think about to help build resilience at scale for your cyber program. So I'm honored to be joined by our three distinguished guests. We've got Linda Stevenson, the CIO at Fisher Titus, Ed Gaudet, the CEO of Censinet, and Jonathan Rigi, the National Advisor for Cybersecurity and Risk at the American Hospital Association. So let's begin with a quick round of introductions, about 20 seconds here and we'll start with Linda, Ed, and then John.
Hello, thanks for having me today. I'm Linda Stevenson. I'm the Chief Information Officer, also the Chief Security Officer, as well as Chief Digital Officer at Fisher Titus Health in Northwest Ohio, which is a rural healthcare organization.
Hi, this is Ed Gaudet. I'm the CEO and founder of Censinet, and we are located in Boston, Massachusetts.
Hey, everybody. I'm John Rigi. I'm the National Advisor for Cybersecurity and Risk at the American Hospital Association. The AHA represents more than 5,000 hospitals across the country, and we've been doing that for about 126 years.
Nice. Thank you. So we want to dive into some of the top themes from this year's benchmarking study, as these themes really reflect what we've consistently heard across the organizations of all sizes and really spotlights where leadership action is mostly needed. And then we'll transition to some of the landscape and some of the other areas of the report. And so I wanted to start with kind of the first theme, which is really being more proactive rather than reactive. And so with this research, we're finding that organizations are still in that reactive mode and responding to incidents after the fact. So some even know that there are vulnerabilities, but they don't really have like clear prioritization or leadership alignment. And awareness alone isn't really protection. Proactive defense really has to be the goal here. And so another theme that we've heard from the report is around third-party risk management as it continues to be a challenge. And we know that within the industry, healthcare organizations really are relying on thousands of third-party vendors, and there's not really a good systematic approach to evaluating and managing all of those risks just yet. We're hearing leaders describe this as like, hey, this is an open door that we can't really see through. And if we've got one weak vendor, it can be an entry point for a major breach in our system. And so another key point that we've been hearing is that AI is here and it's moving fast. And, organizations are working to learn how to assess the risk and define accountability, but they've got governance is really lacking here. And so effective AI management is really going to require some collaboration across multiple departments to ensure that it's ethical and safe to use. And then the last thing that we're seeing is like a major trend from this research is just that medical device security. There are still pretty big gaps in securing these medical devices, and they're pretty critical to care, but they also have major challenges is sometimes they're legacy systems, there's limited patching options, and the lack of visibility kind of all play a role here. And it's a tough area where organizations need to have the right resources to solve it. And so just from a quick overview, like these findings really show that cyber is not really a one-time initiative. It's a system-wide ongoing responsibility, and frameworks really provide a foundation, and benchmarking can bring visibility and alignment, but ultimately progress can come down to action and leadership. And so as we look at kind of the key findings here and the overview, I'd love to kind of hear from you, John, what you're seeing in recent threats around cybersecurity in the healthcare industry and kind of why this all matters.
Thanks, Jaron. And you really said a couple very impactful things that we're focused on, treating cyber risk as an enterprise risk issue. It is not solely within the domain of just the IT department. I think our leaders and our CEOs and boards are well aware now that cyber risk is an enterprise risk issue, with a risk to every function, ultimately a risk to patient safety. So as we always say in the community, cyber safety is really patient safety. So the attacks have increased pretty dramatically since 2020, and they've increased in terms of frequency, complexity, and severity. It's a lot of thought around that on why the sudden increase and very dramatic, almost like a hockey stick type graph line increase. Part of it's due to the pandemic. We made much greater use of network and internet connected technology during the pandemic, but that also increased our attack surface dramatically. Let me just give you some quick numbers. What I do is I try to look at the HHS Office of Civil Rights statistics, where any healthcare entity must report a breach or compromise of protected health information within 60 days. For perspective, in 2020, we had about 450 reported hacks impacting 27 million individuals. Last year, we had 595 reported hacks impacting 259 million Americans. The year before, we had about the same number impacting 138 million Americans. One of the caveats for last year is that 190 million Americans or individuals impacted were from one breach, the Change Healthcare breach. So that resulted in that dramatic increase. But again, overall, we've seen a 500% increase in the hacks affecting individuals' protected health information. We've also seen about a 300% increase in ransomware attacks targeting hospitals and health systems of all sizes, from rural hospitals all the way up to major multi-state systems. In fact, a lot of the reported breaches to the Office of Civil Rights are, in fact, ransomware attacks, which were accompanied by data theft attacks. So we have the data theft attacks targeting hospitals directly, but we also have, and what we're most concerned about, are ransomware attacks, which encrypt networks and data, causing massive disruption and delay to healthcare delivery, resulting in a risk to patient safety. But as I always say, this isn't only a risk to the patients within the hospital. This is a risk to the entire community that depends on the availability of their nearest emergency department. Especially in rural areas, the next nearest hospital might be 35, 50, or 100 miles plus away. The other big issue that we're seeing is third-party risk. The vast majority of even the reported breaches to the Office of Civil Rights, 80% or more, originate from non-hospital healthcare providers, business associates, and third parties. So as hospitals and health systems, we are dramatically exposed to cyber risk through insecure third-party technology, insecure third-party service providers, and insecure third-party supply chain. Most of the breaches that we see, the vast majority, 99.9% of the attacks against U.S. hospitals originate from overseas, primarily from hacking groups that are aligned with or being provided safe harbor by Russia, by China, by North Korea, and Iran. Given all that, and knowing that no matter what we can do, instead of being reactive, as you said, we are stressing that hospitals need to be prepared, obviously proactively defend, but be ready for when that attack occurs to be able to respond, but also to be resilient, have the ability to carry on safe and quality care for 30 days or longer without technology. So we speak in terms of not just business continuity, but clinical continuity. Clinical continuity. Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, no, that's super eye-opening. And as you look at kind of the impact and the call to action for healthcare there, I'd really love to hear kind of Linda, from your perspective at Fisher Titus, how you've really navigated this benchmarking assessment and understanding kind of the implications for healthcare. What's been the value of benchmarking and participating in a study like this?
Thank you. As John mentioned, this isn't just an IT thing anymore. It is an organizational wide thing, and it's also an industry wide initiative. So being part of the benchmarking allows us to gain perspective on where we stand. We do annual risk assessments, but that's only as good as that point in time. So participating in benchmarking gives us the opportunity to say, how successful is our program, and how far down the path do we need to go to be supportive and proactive? As you all know, cybersecurity is never 100%. So where is our next initiative? Where do we prioritize the work that we need to do relative to what everybody else is doing? Especially in rural healthcare, it's difficult. Very small amount of resources available, not only security staff, but security budget. And so I really need to be careful about how I prioritize my spend and prioritize the work that needs to be done. So by doing the benchmarking, it gives me a little bit of more perspective and the ability to take that same perspective, that same information, make sure my leaders are educated and make sure my board is educated, because that is an ongoing initiative as well. It's not a one and done situation.
Yeah. No, it's really helpful to kind of hear more or less where the benchmarking has made a difference for you, especially being in rural healthcare. I mean, we speak with a lot of executives at KLAS who are trying to have that prioritization. Do I fund my cybersecurity initiatives or do I fund nursing? And it's a real world challenge that leaders are dealing with. And as you look at the landscape of the report, and I want to kind of transition to you, Ed, and see from your perspective, looking at, we'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the key findings and a little bit more around kind of the reason behind this report and some of the interesting insights that you think might be significant for healthcare leaders today. Could you dive a little bit more into the report and some of the findings that you see?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, John. So, Censinet with American Hospital Association and KLAS and the other sponsors developed a report to really give back to the industry data that was useful in helping them prepare their cybersecurity programs, but also leverage peer insights. So we all know that everybody loves to see what others are doing, how much they're spending, what the gaps are compared to our program. And so we enable that through the program to give folks a clear understanding and clear visibility, not only into their cybersecurity program and those metrics related to the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is the leading standard framework for cybersecurity preparedness, but also other frameworks that are being used, like the cybersecurity performance goals that were delivered by HHS and the CISA agency. We also look at the health industry cybersecurity practices, or HICCUP, which is delivered through HHS and the 405D. And lastly, we included this year the NIST RMF, which is the AI risk management framework that was recently released to really get a sense for how people are dealing with the risks associated with AI. So it's a very comprehensive study that also includes those organizational benchmarks. Where am I spending my money? Where are the gaps relative to my investments? What's my organizational span of control as it relates to what the CISO organization owns versus other organizations within the health system. So you really get a sense for how you're doing, not only today, but what your roadmap is for closing those gaps over the next couple of years relative to your peer group.
Yeah, no, it's helpful to kind of hear from your perspective, a little bit more around kind of the value of benchmarking that you've seen as well, and more details into the methodology. Are there any key findings that healthcare leaders should be aware about as they digest and look at this research?
Well, you covered it at the beginning the reactive versus proactive, which is a big theme this year. Folks are, obviously everyone understands it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So they spent a lot of time on the respond recover functions within the CSF, which is good. I mean, we have to recover if we do have a cyber attack. Lives are at stake. Obviously, we want to make sure that care continues and isn't disrupted for any long periods of time. So it's good that we're investing in those areas. But again, year over year, and this is the third year running, we continue to see supply chain risk management or the third, the management of third party risks, whether it be the vendor itself or the product that's actually being used within the health system, is still underperforming. And part of that is around asset management, being able to identify what is out there in our health system. We can't protect what we don't know, right? Or we don't see. So it's really important to not only continue to invest in the response recovery, but we also have to look at what we're doing for third parties relative to what John and Linda both said about the importance of those, of those entities within the context of how we run our business, right? Every single function, whether it's clinical, administrative, or other business functions, all run on technology today. And those all rely on some third party. And we all know well enough that we don't want to have another change healthcare experience, right? I think that was a huge wake-up call to the industry to look at those critical functions that continue to operate, that are needed to continue to operate the delivery of care. And one of the data points that we've seen in the study is that we don't test the coverage, the response and recovery planning and of our third parties. So while we may do it internally, we may have a good response system internally and a good recovery system around resilience internally. If one of our third parties goes down, we don't really have a good plan for that recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really spot on in the sense that Change Healthcare was 2024. And, this year there's even as recent as a couple weeks ago, there's even, large cyber events that are happening and impacting the industry every single day.
Hmm.
And we all know it's, as you mentioned, the sentiment, it's not like this, the benchmarking study really highlights that healthcare is starting to understand that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so they're preparing and responding. And one thing that's interesting about the role at KLAS is, I speak with multiple healthcare leaders who are following these frameworks and doing the assessments and identifying these vulnerabilities. But without leadership buy-in, and if gaps aren't necessarily being addressed, I've seen a hospital that really identified what the major vulnerability was, but then before they could address it, it was hit and by a bad actor, and it led to a major attack where patient data was stolen, operations were disrupted. The financial impact was really massive, and it's a stark reminder that cybersecurity is a healthcare issue. It's not just an IT issue, and there's no silver bullet. I loved, Linda, how you kind of talked about that addressing the known risks is essential, but following the foundation and doing the assessments and doing the benchmarking can help support awareness and create more buy-in with your leadership team, because this is a journey and it takes the entire team to help move it forward. I wanted to kind of circle in really quick and just come back and hit everybody one-on-one. We'll start with you, John, then Linda, then Ed. Based off of the findings from this research, what do you think is one thing leaders should take away from this research and do differently moving forward? Starting with John.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we've kind of alluded to it. Using the old cliche, not a matter of if, but when, we take a little different approach to that. We say the question is not if you will be attacked. The question is, are you prepared? We want folks to focus on resiliency, recovery, understanding what their technological dependencies are internally and externally with their third parties, those mission critical dependencies, and develop plans, again, should there be a loss of that technology. I've got to say, one of the things I perhaps didn't mention directly was the Chinese government, according to the US government, has planted destructive malware on our internet and our cellular communications, which could be poised to detonate should there be an invasion of Taiwan. So it's not just criminal actors we have to think about. We've got to think about these big nation state strategic risks that we're facing. We got to be prepared.
Yeah. Go ahead, Linda.
To add to that, part of that preparation is education. I don't think there's enough education that you can do in your organization or to your connected organizations, especially in the clinical areas where gone are the days where a nurse knows how to paper chart. Okay, they just don't anymore. They came in on computers, have always used computers. So if you're not practicing, you're not sitting around the table having drills, you're not understanding not only how the patient's going to be cared for, how you're going to get bills out the door, and therefore how you're going to collect the money on all of that. If you're not having those conversations, you can't have them enough because they've never had to do this before. And so education, education, education. And these tools are one really good way to do that.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Thanks, Linda. And Ed, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say that obviously there's a lot of data that we provide that can be used to shore up your program, but there's also some other benefits that often get overlooked. You can leverage the data for cyber insurance applications. We can demonstrate within the data that if you're following this CSF, you're going to get lower premiums around cyber insurance. We also have participants that have used the data for bond rating submissions as well to again prove that their cybersecurity programs are robust.
Yeah, these are all helpful kind of takeaways. And I want to thank you all for kind of joining us today. As we look to the future, we really want to encourage everybody on the webinar to go and download the 2025 Healthcare Cybersecurity Benchmarking Report. It's packed with insights from the peers across the industry with practical takeaways that you can take back to your teams. And if you have any questions about the research or want to dive deeper into any of these findings, like feel free to reach out to any one of us. We would love to continue the conversation. And then most importantly, we hope this discussion just sparks meaningful dialogue within your organization because, moving forward, the awareness is there, but it also takes collaboration, prioritization, and leadership. So thank you again for being with us today.